here.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a pair of lips that I've lost in the moment. All I want is for you to come back. Now I'm caught in the middle of life, and I
Everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and I'd like to bring before you a guy that I've been wanting to talk to about a year or so, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Bart Sibrel, would you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself before we go into the whether the moon landing was fake or real?
Hey, Rashid. Well, my name is Bart Sibrel. My website is Sibrel.com. That's S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL, Sibrel.com. On that homepage, you can watch a film I made. I've been a filmmaker for over 40 years, and we uncovered footage of them faking part of the moon mission right in front of your eyes with the third track of audio of the CIA telling them how to do it. And prior to that, I was a big fan of the moon missions, and then later had an open mind to at least the possibility that they might have faked it. And then when someone gave me $1 million who builds rockets for NASA, who knows it's fake, who thought it was his patriotic duty to expose it, I started producing that film under the theory it might be true that they faked it. And about 3.5 years into the 7-year project, we found that classified footage of them faking part of the moon mission right in front of your eyes. You can see it in the homepage of Sibrel.com. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they actually did fake the moon landing. How sad and pathetic is that? And to go from someone who not only thought the missions were real to someone who virtually worshiped them, having a shrine of them in my bedroom as a kid, and that followed me wherever I went, to go from one to the other extreme can only happen with the truth. And some people just aren't open minded. I've talked to a college professor who said that if Neil Armstrong confessed on national TV that the moon missions were fake, he'd still think he walked on the moon anyway. They've literally made a god out of science, the moon landing, whatever, which I presume by your name, you're Muslim, which means you believe in God, that the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians have, almost identical ancestry up to very recently. And we all believe in a God of, justice and mercy. And the fact that mankind's greatest boast is a complete fabrication by the most powerful nation on earth that hypocritically claims to be the most just really fits with the fallen world that we live in, sad to say. And when you realize it is true, they actually did fake the moon landing. It's just heartbreaking that mankind has stooped so low, is so juvenile, really, that they would do such a thing. I've been a filmmaker most of my life. And of course, a filmmaker's job is to make fake scenes look real. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that the pictures that they claim are on the moon were lit with electrical lighting, which means they're on Earth, which means they didn't go to the moon. And not only do we have that proof, we have this footage that shows them faking part of the mission in front of your eyes. We have the logic that today, with 50 years better technology, they can now only send an astronaut 1,000th the distance to the moon. I mean, come on. That's like Lindbergh claiming he flew across the Atlantic 3,000 miles in 1927. And 55 years later, in 1982, not a single airplane from any country can fly over the Atlantic, and the very best airplane can only fly 3 miles. It's just impossible for technology to be greater in the past than in the future. If it weren't for this being I guess, a positive lie that people want to hear, they want their team to win the Super Bowl, then they would see it for the truth. And then as my book came out, which is on my website, and audio that I read myself, Kindle and print. We have an eyewitness who saw them film the moon landing at Cannon Air Force Base and even confessed to killing somebody to cover it up. And he was the chief of security at the Air Force's most secure intelligence division base. So I wish the moon landings were real. That would be a better world than we live in, but it is the world. And, people like, what is it, Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck, they say America has gotten bad, but at least we went to the moon. And they don't want to go there. They don't want America to be that bad, the government that corrupt, that arrogant, that they would fake such a thing. They won't go there. They do not have an open mind about that when they should, because otherwise they have cancer that they're in denial about. And it's better to know the truth, as sad as it is, than to deny it.
Didn't you say that there was someone was supposed to be the first person on the moon first, and then he was assassinated or killed in a mysterious explosion prior to Buzz Aldrin and the rest of them being picked or chosen to be the first person on the moon?
Yeah, that's right.
Armstrong.
Yeah, my book is called Moon Man, the true story of a filmmaker on the CIA hit list. That's the one that you can get at my website that I read, or it's Kindle or print. That goes more into the backstory of the producing of the film, which is on the homepage to see for free, called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. That's the one that contains this new footage of them faking part of the mission right in front of your eyes, proving they never left Earth orbit. And one of the things that I mentioned in the book that's not in the movie are interviews I did with Apollo astronauts' relatives who asked that I not release the information until after they died. I did a 4-hour interview with the widow of the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon. He was the most beloved of all the astronauts in the public's opinion and in the press corps. So they had chosen him to be the first man to walk on the moon. His name was Virgil Grissom. He said they were 10 years away from going to the moon, not 2, in 1967. And he was so frustrated that nothing would work. They couldn't even get a wired intercom to work between 2 buildings. In fact, one of his last words were, if we can't get a wired intercom to work between 2 buildings, how are we going to go to the moon? And he, without permission, days before he died, brought a bunch of reporters up to the top of the rocket where he affixed a lemon the size of a grapefruit, calling the moon rocket a lemon, a piece of junk. This infuriated the superiors. He received death threats by leaders in the federal government, to where on the day he died, he was actually under Secret Service whistleblower protection. Again, I talked to his widow. This is his widow's accusation, not mine, or mine secondly. She said on January 26, 1967, he telephoned her from NASA and said, "Hon, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad today. I've been here for years, never seen the CIA one time. Why did they show up today to inspect the equipment?" The very next day, he's dead from faulty equipment. His wife and his son, who's a 747 pilot, says with 100% certainty he was murdered by the CIA. Now, this is very serious. Not only are they faking moon landings with our tax dollars, right? A third or more of our income goes to federal taxes, which they're using to deceive us and to pay the salaries of CIA agents who are murdering our family members who try to expose their crimes, right? Isn't the Declaration of Independence the first document that precedes the Constitution? And it says when any government becomes destructive of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Well, the first one is life. According to Betty Grissom, they're murdering their own people. According to lying Wikipedia, they had to admit the truth that during the Kennedy administration, Operation Northwoods was proposed by the Pentagon, a brilliant idea for the Pentagon to kill 200 Americans randomly to blame it on Cuba so they could go to war with Cuba. They put that in writing. Now, I don't know about you, Rashid, but I think technically that's attempted murder, isn't it? Isn't it when you plot to kill people? Can't you go to jail for that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I were Kennedy, I would have said, okay, who thinks that's a great idea? Raise your hand. And everyone who raised their hand, I'd cart them off to jail and throw them in jail for 20 years. So our government is already, agreeing to murder their own people to achieve their ends. According to the dead man's relative, Bobby Kennedy Jr., his uncle, President Kennedy, with 100% certainty, was killed by the CIA. And then Robert McNamara, the defense secretary during the Vietnam War, which Kennedy rescinded and Johnson reinstated the first day he was president. They said, look, the public is not behind this war. Do you realize on December 6th, 1941, 90% of Americans were against entering World War II? Have 90% of Americans ever agreed on anything except GMO labeling, which the president vetoed? And you call this a democracy? 90% of Americans wanted GMO labeling, and the president refused to do it, according to the Congress wishes and the wishes of the American people. That's not a democracy. So after Pearl Harbor happened, one day later, December 7th, 1941, 90% of Americans wanted to get even and entered World War II. So John McNamara, defense secretary under Johnson, shortly after he took over from Kennedy, they said, look, we want to start this war, but the public's against it. We need something like Pearl Harbor. So Robert McNamara confessed as he was dying that this alleged attack of a North Vietnamese ship on an American ship in the Gulf of Tonkin, it never happened. They completely made it up. You realize Congress passed a law called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. Congress passed a law to start a war on an event that never happened that the CIA fabricated. How can we have representatives when they're being led not by us, but by the lies of the CIA? So, according to the dead man's relative, the CIA is willing to kill the president of the United States. I think that's election interference, isn't it? They're
Mm-hmm.
willing to kill 3 million Asians plus 58,220 of their own people. So I don't think they're going to have a problem faking a video image of the moon when there's no independent press coverage. It's just that it's a positive lie that people want. I mean, whoever killed Kennedy, you can change the hat on who did it and why, but it's still a tragedy. Or 9/11, who did it and why, it's still a tragedy. The moon landing is different. It's a positive lie. Giving a child the piece of candy that they wanted. I come along trying to take away that candy. People like anti-corruption people like Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck are defending the people they criticize 99% of the time because it's a positive lie. We went to the moon. I'm sorry, they did not. You cannot have 1,000 times greater space traveling technology in 1969 than today. Go to Sibrel.com. You'll see my film of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes, proving they never left Earth orbit. Why would you fake being halfway to the moon if you could go halfway? And here we are, 55 years later, and they still can't leave Earth orbit. One of the clips at my website is an own NASA engineer saying the technology to survive on a trip to the moon has not been invented yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did they go to the moon in 1969? And then, why would a guy who was the chief of security at the United States Air Force's Intelligence Division say as he was dying, I'm a murderer? Why did you kill the guy? To cover up the moon landing fraud. Kind of a funny thing to say as you're trying to get right with God in your last hours of life. And then you can prove the moon landing is a fraud with one picture of shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart when the shadows should be parallel in sunlight. Go to Sibrel.com, go outside on a sunny day, look at two trees, two people, two telephone poles. Their shadows always run parallel. It's impossible for them to intersect. We have a picture of objects at 5 feet apart where their shadows intersect at 90 degrees, proving electrical lighting, proving they're on Earth, proving they didn't go to the moon. We have 4 times the proof necessary, and people are ignoring it because they don't want to go there. They don't want to live in a nation that is so bad that they fake the moon landing. But we do. So when you want to know if you have cancer, I don't know what to say, but that's the sad truth. Before we started, you were going to ask me, what was my epiphany when I went from believing to to not believing. For me, it was the footage I uncovered of them faking being halfway to the moon with a 1 foot model of the Earth. Like I said, it's on the homepage of my website. But I wanted to ask you that question. I mean, did you grow up thinking the moon landings are real and at some point, you know, convert to the truth? What was your experience like?
I grew up thinking it was real, but I never wholly accepted because I don't really believe the government. Eh, because they've done some heinous things and they continue to lie and deceive, and a lot of the covert operations to mass kill, have people killed on a massive scale. It just, I lost all faith in this system, because they're always pushing for war and never for building up people or building up families or building up morals or ethics. So that was one of the things that got me. But as a kid, I was always into like Space 1999, Star Trek. A lot of people might not know what the whole space shows are, but and I thought it was possible as a kid. But as I started looking more and more into this situation, I had my doubts, and one day I saw you give your little speech and talking about things, and I've been trying to get in contact with you for the longest so that you could get on this platform to explain your perspective, because some people try to dismiss you outright, because sometimes maybe the truth is not palatable at the time. So again, what made you double down on your perspective? Because I know you had to have a lot of people against you, and I know if you're pushing this hard, the government had to get involved in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I went from believing they were real to worshiping, having a shrine of Apollo pictures in my home that followed me year after year wherever I went. Then I saw a guy on TV who worked for NASA with top security clearance say that they falsified it like a bluff in poker. I went back to the pictures and I started seeing horizontal lines left to right where real soil ended and a fake picture became the backdrop, almost straight across left to right. I'm thinking, that's interesting. Then I met the guy who produced the TV program I had made, or he that I had watched. He made it. He put me in touch with that gentleman. He said I should do a movie about it. I originally turned down the project. I thought there are enough suspicious things about it that indicate at least it's possible that they faked it. And I realized if I started overturning these rocks and they did fake it, could be hazardous to my health. So I'm like, I want to have a wife and family someday. I'm not going to risk my life for what Nixon did. It wasn't until I read the scriptures and I read them 5 times from cover to cover, that I realized there is a God, there is a judgment to come. And if they faked the moon landing, that's actually more significant than if they had actually gone. Do you see that? Either they planted a flag, came back, even though they can't do it with 5 decades better technology today, or the most important, powerful nation, I wouldn't say important, the most powerful nation on earth, falsified mankind's greatest accomplishment and murdered people to cover it up and embezzled money. If that's true, and I sadly assure you it is, then that's actually more significant historically than if they had actually gone. Do you see that? The
Mm-hmm.
faking of the moon landing is more profound than if they really went and came back. And when you realize that is true, it is worth dying for. I realize we're going to die anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting things of the second to last chapter about Revelation, it lists a bunch of sins that if you don't repent of, you will not enter eternal life. We are saved by God's grace. All of our repenting will not, get us into heaven without God's grace, but we have to take hold of God's grace by letting go of our sin. That's why it says Jesus died for the whole world, but only a few people will make it into heaven. And as it lists those sins, lying, stealing, sexual immorality, drunkenness, you know what the first sin is that will prevent you from getting into heaven? It says the cowardly will not enter heaven. And Hebrews chapter 2 says something interesting. It says the devil, and Muslims believe in Lucifer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the devil holds all of mankind in slavery by their fear of death. The Bible says that anything without faith is a sin. So fear is a sin. You see that? And why did people get this medicine for an illness they didn't even have a few years ago? Because of fear of death. And that entrapped them into dying, a lot of
Hmm.
people. So I originally turned down the project for fear of death, but I realized I'm going to die anyway. Do I want to be remembered as a coward or as someone who stood up for what is right? And that's what I chose to do, even though it was 5 years later. Better late than never. And they did fake the moon landing. It's highly significant. Prayerfully, the truth will come out. And do let me ask you this: do Muslims believe that we're in the last days
Yes,
of the earth? That
yes,
judgment, God's judgment is soon?
yes. We believe that
Yeah,
Jesus
to
is
me,
the
I find it so
Messiah.
fascinating. I find it so fascinating that Jews, Muslims, and Christians are so similar to one another, and yet they, in fighting one another and everything. There's only a slight little difference of who claims what historically, and but there is a God, and we all three religions come from Jacob and Isaac, and what is it? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and
Ishmael.
I forget the three it mentions all the time: Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and and Adam, before them. So and why the world is the way that it is, I don't know, other than free will. In order for God to have a true family, you can't have a little robot dog, Radio Shack dog, that loves you because it's programmed to. You have to have free will, and free will means eventually we will choose poorly,
Mhm.
and therefore, you know, what turned out to be this fallen world will still work for God's benefit because it will sift out people who truly believe in God. It says in the book of John, sorry, First John, this is love for God, to obey the commandments. Jesus said, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I say?" And I don't know if you know the old banks, they would have a safety deposit box with two keys. It
Mhm.
took two keys to open it up and get into heaven. One from God, the bank. Jesus died for the whole world. And then the second one is your repentance. You can repent without God's grace and you won't get into heaven. But God's grace is turned to everybody, but they won't enter because they love sin more than God's righteousness. He calls us to repent. And so that's what I try to do every day. I think one interviewer asked me a few months ago, "What's your day like?" I'm like, repenting of my sin. That's what my day is like. And I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't have no ill feelings about the people who faked the moon landing, dead or alive. I wish them well. I pray for them. I know that they're harassed and helpless sheep without a shepherd, just like myself. But what they did is significant and they need to save themselves. What good is it to gain the whole world and forfeit your soul?
Mhm.
And that's what the moon landing represents. It represents this great folly. If you go to Sibrel.com, on the homepage is the film A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. And we open up with the Tower of Babel, which all three religions agree took place. It was a tower to reach the heavens, and it was never finished, which the Messiah said proves you're a fool for starting something you couldn't finish, right? A rebuke, you could say, for all of mankind, that's unfinished tower. Then we show of the 20th century the largest machine built by the hand of man, a ship called Titanic, that put in print the ship that God himself could not sink.
Mhm.
We know what happened there.
Mhm.
Tower of Babel never finished. Titanic never made one voyage. And then Nixon said when he knew they were not on the moon, putting a man on the moon is second in greatness only to God making the universe.
Mhm.
You see that? This is a blasphemous lie. And I believe from a spiritual point of view, maybe the truth will come out in the last days to help us see our sin. It would be like a cold glass of water thrown into believers' faces of who think the moon landings are real. They wake up, they realize they've been sleepwalking, and they look down and they're 1 foot away from a cliff.
Mhm.
And I think maybe God will give us that rebuke to help us. And we'll see. You know, if a president really wants to end corruption, there's no greater tool to do so than showing the public they were taken for suckers 6 times. And the federal government also murdered people to keep it a secret. The guy who confessed that he eyewitnessed the moon landing fraud and killed somebody to cover it up. I was just talking to his son while I'm editing my book, make sure I get the details correct. And he was met by the CIA, who threatened to kill him and his family if he ever spoke to me again. This is just a few years ago. And we had the United States Senate Intelligence Committee investigate this, whose records are sealed because they know the moon landings are fake, but they're afraid to tell the public about it. So I don't know what more to say. They did fake the moon landing. It's sad, but so be it. It's better to know that you have cancer than pretend like you don't.
I want to play a clip for you. We gotta overlook the cursing in it, but it's a short clip, and this guy he raises a lot of questions. I mean, a lot of good questions. And it's only a minute, so just bear with me 1 second.
Bullshit, because everyone's telling you I was fucking
you
wrong.
Showed me.
Yeah, so fucking explain to me. Here you go. The guy's getting off the rocket ship. Who the fuck is filming him? Who's filming him?
A guy?
How'd the fucking guy get up there if this is the first guy that's supposed to be on the fucking moon? A different rocket ship?
I don't know.
So they sent the rocket ship up there. He got off and he's like, all right, come on up now. I'm ready to fucking film. Are you fucking serious?
The same rocket ship?
He's supposed to be the first guy on the moon. It's bullshit. The car. How the fuck did the car fit in that rocket ship? Look, how did that car fit in the rocket ship?
I don't know.
Okay, right. More bullshit. Then the guy's floating around with a big fucking cord to his stomach, and they're telling you that's his fucking, life support. Was it fucking feeding him through the fucking tube like a baby? They fucking get bouncing around like a fucking jerk off. Yeah, watch. Let me show you. There it goes. Bye-bye. You know what? I'm gonna stay behind. You guys go back to Earth. I'll fucking die up here. And how the fuck did he get the film back to Earth? Yeah, look, the fake fucking parachute. Hey, we're home now. What happened to the guy back on the moon? They just left him?
I guess so.
Yeah, everyone guesses they don't have any fucking facts. Bullshit.
So how did all of the equipment get on the moon?
Well, first, let me say about the guy's expletives. This is really good proof why you should not have draft beer in your own house.
I like that.
Now, Muslims don't drink, correct? You guys
Right.
don't drink, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm a Sabbath keeper. You also don't eat pork, right?
Right.
Yeah. God never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, tomorrow. Why would he call it an abomination in one part of the Bible and say it's perfectly fine in another, right? But in any case, side story. Well, that's really not, the number one proof that we have. If you want, I can share screen and show you much more significant proof than that if your viewers have never seen it before.
Okay.
If you want to see it or not.
Yes.
I can do that. Let me check and see if everything's okay here. I think let's leave studio. I want to share. Share screen, entire screen. Do here, share. So you should be seeing my logo. Is that correct?
Yes. I see.
Okay.
I'll bring it up
So
on
bring
the
up
screen.
bring up the logo full screen. I'm going to go ahead and open this up over here. Just give me a second. That's my website, Sibrel.com. And I'll click open this folder. Here, I'm going to show how we can prove that the moon landings are fake in just one picture. Let me just show that first. Here we are. So over here on the left is the way shadows should look in sunlight. The sun is 1,000,000 times bigger than the earth, and it's going to cast shadows in the same direction over the entire earth or moon. They're parallel. It's impossible for shadows to intersect that are lit by the sun. Mathematically, scientifically, on the right, the alleged last mission to the moon, astronaut shadow, 12 o'clock, a rock about 5 feet away, 9 o'clock. 90-degree difference from objects 5 feet apart that should be parallel. We just proved in one picture the moon landings are fake. There you go. How simple can that be, right? And now, if you want to go to my website here, I'll bring up, let me do it this way. File, new window. Okay, so we'll go to Sibrel.com. Okay, so here's my website. And here is the film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. Here's the book you can get. It's in Kindle, audio, or print. I have a podcast you can subscribe to. I have a book about aliens, where they are really from. Even have a children's book about the moon people faking a trip to Earth through their leader, Dr. Von Wrong, that just came out. And here's me. Here I am on Joe Rogan, Candace Owens, Infowars, Patrick Beck David. And here's an article about how the smartest AI in the world just said the moon missions were fake. And because of the photographs, the Apollo pictures all had fake backgrounds, according to the smartest AI in the world. But let's go to A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. We'll go to YouTube. We'll make it full screen. And basically, we uncovered this footage here that's supposed to be the Earth floating in space. In fact, this is what Neil Armstrong says here. I don't know if you can pick up on the audio, but okay, so this is the part that they aired to the public. 2 days into the flight, which the tape is dated, they're supposed to be halfway to the moon. Now, how can they falsely prove that to the audience? They claim there's only one window that faces the Earth and it's filled up with a TV camera, meaning the lens would have to be at the glass in order to shoot what they claim this is the Earth floating in space. And this is supposed to be the Terminator line between night and day. We have the unedited version of this. This is actually the circular window of the spacecraft, and the camera is at the back of the spacecraft. All the lights are turned off, and you're seeing part of the Earth outside of a circular window. They insert a little crescent piece of black material to make it look like the Terminator line between night and day. And then here's the unedited version they never showed to the public, where you can see them breaking down the effect. Remember, that was supposed to be the Earth floating in space, but you can see there it's really the window. That's one of the astronauts breaking down the effect in front of the window. And then the lights come up and you see the real position of the camera, which is at the back of the spacecraft, and how they just made the circular window appear to be the Earth floating in space. So that's them faking being halfway to the moon. My critics agree. This is them faking being halfway to the moon, which they would never have to do if they really went to the moon. Two NBC news directors agree. That is them faking being halfway to the moon, which proves they never left Earth orbit. And like I said, here we are 55 years later, and they still cannot leave Earth orbit. So that's really the proof. And then if you want, I can show you a picture of Cyrus Eugene Akers. This is the gentleman who was the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base. In 1968, he said as he was dying that they filmed the fake moon landing there. And as he was dying, he confessed to a murder, which was investigated by the Air Force military police because he was in the military police. When they asked him, why did you kill the coworker in 1968, he said to cover up the moon landing fraud, which was filmed there. President Johnson showed up for the first day of filming, gave him a list of 15 VIPs who were allowed in to witness it. He saved that list as a souvenir, and we publish it in the book. So sad to say, he did indeed fake the moon landing, and now we know when it was done, where it was done. It was done at Cannon Air Force Base. And so we have really more than enough proof necessary to prove that they faked the moon landing to anyone with an open mind. After I did the Joe Rogan interview, I'm paraphrasing, but we put the quote on Sibrel.com, and it's a guy who watched it saying, I always assumed they went to the moon, but not after watching the interview with Bart Sibrel, and especially not after reading his book. Now it's so obvious that they faked it. And one of the things that I'm accused of repeating myself one too many times in the book is the fact that today, with 5 decades better technology, the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into space is only 1,000th the distance to the moon. You see that? How could they with 1960s untried technology that predates most cell phones and microwaves, when all of NASA combined had 1/millionth the computing power of a cell phone. How could they go 1,000 times farther into space than they can go now with 5 decades better technology? Just 10 years after the first atomic bomb was blown up, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. So if they could go to the moon on the first attempt, we would have been on Mars 10 years later in another solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon. You cannot have greater technology in the past and in the future, which proves it right there by logic. And people just don't want to accept that. But I'm sorry, your team cheated to win the Super Bowl. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
Well, I was looking at a video clip, and I don't know how true it is, but this young guy, he was talking about how the people that were supposed to have been killed in, like, I think the Challenger explosion or Columbia explosion, how some of these people are still alive, and they're and he had side by side pictures of them, and they with almost the exact name, and how they're some of them are teaching up at college. Do you believe that?
I don't know. I know they could fake a death if they wanted to. I had a private conversation with Eugene Krantz, the flight director. Somebody asked me to call him after his name appeared on that list by the chief of security. He was one of the eyewitnesses to the faking of the moon landing at Cannon Air Force Base. Some good guys I know asked me to call him and one other person on the list after I found it and before it was published in the book, which I was a little bit afraid to do. But they said, "We've got your back. Have we ever let you down?" So when I called him up, he coincidentally was supposed to be having a private, secure video conferencing calls at that time. And he answered the phone originally with not saying anything. I mean, how many people answer the phone and say nothing? And I'm like watching the meter go by. I hang up, I call him back, and he says, "Is this tech support about the satellite conference I have with Cernan?" Apparently, he has some highly sophisticated, scrambled private conversation, military grade in his house that he can talk to other Apollo people about privately on. And he says, "Is this about the scheduled call with Cernan?" Well, that has to be Apollo astronaut Eugene Cernan, who allegedly died a couple of years earlier.
Wow.
And was the most fit of all the astronauts. But in any case, if they wanted to fake deaths, they could. The point is, though, which of the two incidences do you think would more upset the public and bring down the house of corruption? The fact that 8 astronauts that supposedly died in an explosion are still alive, or the fact that they faked the moon landing 6 times? You see, the fact that they faked the moon landing 6 times is so much more egregious, 1,000 times more. So what does the Challenger, allegation do? It takes you away from that. Do you understand? This is a red herring distraction. It doesn't matter. It takes focus away from the greater fraud that is more embarrassing and more powerful if the truth came to light, which is the faking of the moon landing. The most powerful resource we have is not money, it's time. You can lose $1 billion in the stock market and make it up next week. You can always make more money. You can never make more time. So if we spend our time on the Challenger and flat Earth or whatever else, pop culture news, some celebrity found OD'd, then we have less time to focus on the moon landing fraud, which is the most powerful weapon to bring down the corruption. I mean, think about it. If the truth came out right now, the president forced one of these guys to confess, you could hear a pin drop. Heads would roll. Hearings would happen. You understand? How many hearings are going on right now about who killed JFK when their own intelligence committee said in 1976 that there's a second gunman at loose who's never been caught, right? How many? There's 3,000 architects and engineers who say the buildings in 9/11 were brought down with explosives. How many hearings are there about JFK? 0. 9/11 hearings? 0. Apollo fraud hearings? 0. The UFO hearings? Oh, really? When their number one source, when pressed on the issue, did you ever see an aircraft or see an alien yourself? He says, well, no, but my superiors say they exist, and they're holding hearings based on that because they want us to believe in UFOs. And that's what my second book, Aliens, is about, an alien deception that von Braun moon landing frauder said they were going to do. They're going to fake an alien invasion. So there's only so many hours in the day, and maybe the Challenger people are alive. To me, it's irrelevant. The greater fraud that we're not using our valuable time to prove is the moon landing fraud. So anything else is just a distraction.
And let me play this 20-second clip, and I want your perspective on this.
The moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
When you said,
yeah, basically this is a NASA astronaut, Don Pettit, saying for the first time in the history of the world, a technology that was created was intentionally destroyed, right? If you're ever going to do that, you might do that with the atomic bomb. You could say, well, it ended the war, but let's just not go there anymore. It's too dangerous. And like I said, 10 years later, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. So if they could go to the moon on the first attempt, imagine 10 years later, we should have been on Mars and another solar system by now and bases all over the moon. So not only was this a technological achievement for the first time in history that no one on Earth could repeat 50 years later. Imagine again, Lindbergh flies across the Atlantic in 1927, and 55 years later, not a single airplane is able to fly across the Atlantic. And the best that we can do in 1982 is only 3 miles instead of 3,000, you see? So what not only is it that the case, like a breakthrough, like breaking the sound barrier, flying across the Atlantic, splitting the atom, to make a claim that someone did such a thing that no one could repeat 50 years later, and that the original 50-year-old claim is today 1,000th as advanced. That's never happened in the history of the world, and neither has destroying the technology. Like I said, they could have done that with the atomic bomb, but they didn't. The B-52 is nearly 70 years old, and there's still 200 of them in service because nothing works better. If they spent an equivalent of $250 billion to go to the moon, the last thing you would do would be to destroy it. But that's exactly what you would do if you perpetrated a fraud, right? They destroyed all the hardware, all the schematic, all the blueprints, all the telemetry data where the rocket really was, intentionally destroyed, and the original videotapes, right? So that they can't be seen at the highest quality possible. You would never do that if you really went, but that's exactly what you would do if you perpetrated a fraud. So there you go. There's, in a way, that's proof that they didn't go. You can go to Sibrel.com, and if you want to play another clip, go to the one about the Van Allen radiation belt. We have a NASA employee saying the technology to survive the radiation on a trip to the moon has not been invented yet. So we have NASA's own people saying something's wrong here. If the technology today doesn't exist and hasn't been developed yet to go to the moon, then how did they go in 1969? You see, there's many space shuttle astronauts who say we hope to eventually go to the moon, or we'll be the first crew to leave Earth orbit, all of which is true that they apparently accidentally said.
So here's part of what you're saying.
Orion is getting ready to launch. My name is Kelly Smith, and I work on navigation and guidance for Orion. Orion is NASA's next-generation spacecraft. Built with versatility in mind, it can take astronauts deeper into space than we've ever gone before, to an asteroid, or even onto Mars. For these missions, Orion has to be one tough spacecraft, withstanding high speeds, searing temperatures, and extreme radiation. Before we can send astronauts into space on Orion, we have to test all of its systems. And there's only one way to know if we got it right: fly it in space. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. For this flight, it's time to head home.
Solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. You want to play the last 10 seconds, even though I quoted them word for word? We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. Okay, so there's two admissions there. The challenges have not been solved yet, and they must be before you send people through this region of space. The region of space is a field of radiation that's 30,000 miles thick that you'd have to go through to the moon and come back through from the moon. You'd have to go through the radiation twice. We must solve these radiation challenges before we send people through this region of space. The radiation challenges have not been solved, and they have to be before people can go to the moon. So if the challenges haven't been solved, then how did they go to the moon? Right? He's saying it right there. I don't know what more to say. The guy just admitted that they didn't go to the moon indirectly. I called up NASA to talk with the guy. They said, well, now that he put his foot in his mouth, we don't let him talk to reporters. And I said, well, you sent up these probes with Geiger counters. Can I please have the Geiger counter readings? They said, that's a classified military secret. That would be like saying the temperature of the sun is a military secret. Why would a part of nature be a military secret? Why would the amount of radiation surrounding the Earth be a military secret? Unless it proved that they couldn't go to the moon. Because in my book, we show links, and they're for free at Sibrel.com, where Van Allen, the guy who discovered them, and it's on the homepage of Sibrel.com too, he says the radiation surrounding the Earth is 100 times a lethal dose.
Whoa.
So that's what he said when he first discovered them. And he was one of the people at Cannon Air Force Base on the list of VIP eyewitnesses who suddenly recanted and said, oh, I must have been mistaken about the radiation. In fact, von Braun said it's impossible to go to the moon in one rocket. He said it on camera, which we show at Sibrel.com, and he said it in writing, which we have in my book. He said the largest rocket you can build can only achieve Earth orbit, and from there you would have to ferry fuel to a fuel station first in order to have enough fuel to leave Earth orbit and go to the moon. Elon Musk said the same thing. His rocket is 3 stories taller than the Apollo rocket, and if you add the boosters on the side, can carry twice as much fuel. So carrying twice as much fuel as the Apollo rocket, he says it's going to take at least 15 trips or 30 Apollo rockets in order to leave Earth orbit and have enough fuel to go to the moon and come back. So if that's what it takes today, when they're not going to make the rocket 1 ounce heavier or 1 inch taller than it has to be, then how do they go to the moon with 1/30th that amount of fuel, right? And in fact, fuel efficiency should be increasing rather than decreasing, correct? How can you have a car with more miles per gallon in 1950 than you do today, right?
So how do they explain all the equipment coming in on that little ship that landed on the moon, supposedly landed on the moon, and how are they explaining how without any infrastructure that it just shot back off without any fire, propulsion, or anything off the moon?
Well, they claim the lunar lander car, unfolded from a side pocket, which would have made the lunar lander very heavy on one side and difficult to land. For example, just landing a rocket vertically, like the original science fiction movies, had the rocket leave the Earth, and whether they were on Jupiter, Mars, or the moon, or whatever, it landed vertically. That was the way they imagined it in their minds. Elon Musk's rocket has 600 million times more computing power than the lunar lander from 1969. 600 million times more computing power. And it's computers that land the rocket vertically because a human can't do it. The space shuttle lands by computers, not by hand, because it's the aerodynamic window to get that thing to land as a glider is so narrow a human cannot do it. Has to be done by computer. So having 600 million times the computing power than the lunar lander, the first time Elon Musk tried to land a rocket vertically, it blew up. Second time, it blew up. Third time, it blew up. Fourth time, it blew up. Took him 5 times to land a rocket vertically, and yet with 1/600 millionth the computing power, they landed a rocket vertically 6 times without a problem. And then, right? You should bring up a news clip. It says exactly what I'm saying in a print article. Elon Musk says it's going to take 15 rocket trips of fuel in order to go to the moon. We just had the radiation guy says the radiation challenges have not been solved yet, and we must do that before we can send people to the moon. How is it that they can drive cars and play golf on the moon with 1960s technology, 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone? And today, the best they can do is have mannequins orbit the moon. Mannequins, right? They said in 2014, by 2018, we're going to have people orbiting the moon, and they were 4 years behind schedule and could only have mannequins orbiting the moon. Mannequins. I wonder why. Because they would die because of the radiation. The guy said so. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this radiation. They haven't solved that problem yet. Otherwise, there'd be people orbiting the moon instead of mannequins, right?
Hmm. And do you think that this lie can go on for 10 or 20 more years if it is a lie? And is it a Manhattan Project type lie where a lot, this person doesn't know what that person is doing, and that person doesn't know what that person is doing?
Well, yeah, that's called departmentalization. It's what they used in the Manhattan Project to build what was the number one secret during World War II, the atomic bomb. One of the reasons people say it must be true, the moon landings, is that it involved hundreds of thousands of people, and you couldn't keep a secret from that many people. Well, duh. Do you think the CIA is so stupid to tell the person making the glove or the door handle or the boot, hey, we're really not going to the moon. Be sure not to tell anybody. I mean, come on. That's like saying what a bank teller, and there's hundreds of thousands of bank tellers at Bank of America, that what a bank teller knows about corruption in the bank is identical to what the CEO knows. That's just absurd. The fact is, people in the command center, according to the flight director, right? Everybody debating whether we went to the moon or not, probably 2/3 of them, it happened before they were born. And to the other third, it happened when they were like 4 or 5 years old, and they watched it at the most from their living room. Well, according to Eugene Krantz, flight director who I spoke to, someone in the command center during the launch can tell no difference whatsoever between a simulated flight and a quote real flight. Just a bunch of numbers going by on a screen. So if someone in the command center can't tell the difference, then someone in their living room as a 4-year-old won't be able to tell the difference either. And the other excuse they say it must be real is because the Russia or the Chinese would have blown the whistle. Well, not necessarily. I know somebody who works in the Chinese Space Agency, and they say everybody there knows the moon missions are fake. And rather than blurt it out and have that information become meaningless, they're blackmailing the United States for space technology that Congress forbid them to receive. Russia's doing the same thing. We have Putin there being shown the results of the AI that said every Apollo picture had a fake backdrop. Doesn't look surprised at all. Looks like he's more afraid that the truth will come out and he'll lose blackmailing leverage against the United States. And that's what a clever opponent would do. I could have a picture of a world leader with a prostitute, upload it to the internet, and I can't even get $1 from it after that. Or I could blackmail them. $1 million this year, 10 million the next year, 20 million the next year. And that's what the Soviets and the Chinese are doing. Another good reason for the truth to come out.
So here it is up here. I put in Elon Musk says it will take 15 trips to the moon, and it says AI overview. Elon Musk mentioned 15 or more rapid launches for SpaceX Starship to refuel for a moon mission, and not 15 trips to the moon itself, but rather tanker flights to fuel one lunar starship, with estimates ranging from 8 to 16 launches needed for a single crew journey. a complex process requiring many orbital refuels before heading to the moon. So just
That's what Von
wow.
Braun said. Yeah. Well, one of the clips at Sibrel.com is Von Braun saying the exact same thing. On camera, he says the largest rocket man can build can only achieve Earth orbit. And if after that we fuel multiple fuel trips, and then we'll have enough to leave Earth orbit and orbit the moon. He didn't even say land. He said just to orbit the moon, it would take that. And then we have him saying in writing, he says it would, if you wanted to go to the moon and from Earth in the fewest number of rockets possible, you could take 3 rockets if they weighed 800,000 tons, which is 10 times the Queen Mary, taller than the Empire State Building. And it's 800,000 tons. The Saturn V was only 2,500 tons. That's a difference of 30,000% times 3. So he says it's just not possible. Elon Musk says it's not possible. And in a recent TED talk, the guy said the same thing. It may take more than 20 launches. No one wonders why it didn't take that in 1969. You have a news story and makes kind of the side news, end of the news cast, that Neil Armstrong claimed he picked up a rock. This is chain of custody, puts it in his pocket, and carries it personally to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands in 1969, gives it to him, who immediately puts it in a hermetically sealed box and in a museum. My film comes out, museum curator got curious. So one night he opens it up, puts it under a microscope, and it's a piece of out of this world looking petrified wood. Now, unless trees are growing on the moon, it's a fake moon rock. So the story even says moon rock proves to be a fake, but no one asks if the moon rocks are fake. What about the moon missions? You see, and it just boggles the mind. 2 NBC news directors agree the footage we just showed proves they didn't leave Earth orbit because they're faking being halfway to the moon. And they were threatened by the federal government to unplug their network if they broadcast that footage. The Washington Post interviewed me, saw the same footage. They said it proves we didn't go to the moon. And I said, well, why don't you do a story about that? He says, if I did, I'd be fired. So the truth is so shocking. The media is afraid to publish it. You understand that? We can't publish it because it will be too shocking. The truth is too shocking. I tried to promote my film or interviews about this topic on YouTube, who just turned on my ad revenue, but they won't allow me to promote it with ads, even if I pay for them. But if my film was about how the moon landings are real, they would allow me to promote it. So they'll allow the lie to be promoted, but they won't allow the truth to be promoted. That's the upside down world that we live in, and why it's important, as you know, Rashid, to see this from a spiritual point of view. Lucifer is called the father of lies. Get this, Revelation 9:11 says Apollo is a nickname for Lucifer. They put it right there, hidden in plain sight, right on the rocket. Apollo, liar, mankind's greatest accomplishment, mankind's Tower of Babel. There was a famous female author, the most published female author in the world. She said about the Tower of Babel, their monument to their pride became a memorial to their folly. That could be said theoretically in the future about the moon landing. The monument to their pride became a memorial to their folly. If the people who run the world want a new world order, which simply means number one is not number one anymore, it's a new order, they could tell the truth about the moon landing fraud, bring the U.S. down a few pegs, crash the dollar, the stock market by telling the truth about the moon landing fraud. They could use it to their advantage. And I know if you cut off a gangrene limb, it's painful and you have to live the rest of your life with one limb missing. But that's still better than the whole body dying. And those are the choices before us about the moon landing fraud. If we don't tell the truth, these murderers are still at large and they have won. We have to be concerned about what God thinks, not man thinks. Will it be an embarrassment and maybe we'll just sweep it under the rug, one more administration? That's being concerned what man thinks. We need to be concerned what God thinks. That's why I changed my mind from turning down the project for fear of death to realizing I'm going to die anyway and I don't want to be a coward. And the faking of the moon landing is an important truth mankind needs to know, or we will never go forward. We'll only go backwards. Because if the truth makes us free, then lies make us slaves. And if it's a lie that everyone believes we went to the moon, then we're all slaves. How about that?
And why do you think that no one questions the and I'll let you go because I know your time is up. But why do you think that no one questions why America would put so much money into the so-called Apollo moon landing and then afterwards just stop going? Yeah, I mean, just stop going to the moon, stop investing in the moon, stop doing anything, and they're always talking about being the best and taking advantage and dominating theaters of space. But yet, when it came to the moon landing, they just stopped going.
Yeah, if something could be commercially exploited, it would be. I mean,
Right.
the world's full of millionaires who would pay tens of millions of dollars to play basketball in 1/6 gravity on a dome basketball court in the moon, where they could jump 8 feet in the air and everyone could slam dunk. Right? That yeah, it doesn't really make any sense why they stopped. Some people defending the lie say, well, they just don't want to go. Well, actually, they've said 10 times they're going to return to the moon in 5 years. 10 times, and they can't do it. Don't you find that a little odd? They can't even put people into lunar orbit, which they said they were going to do in 2014 by 2018, 4 years behind schedule. Instead of people, they had mannequins. You see, I get these emails. I remember one from 3 or 4 years ago. What are you going to do when Artemis has people walking on the moon next year? I said it's not going to happen. Got one a month ago. What are you going to do when Artemis has people walking on the moon this year? It's not going to happen. I believe they're going to postpone it until some worldwide calamity like an asteroid hits, at which point no one's going to care who killed Kennedy or if the moon landings are fake. They're going to want to know where food and water is coming from. But from a spiritual point of view, I think maybe the United States is going to get a big rebuke from God and earthquakes and a meteor strike and something for being the nation on earth that created this blasphemous lie. The way to save that off might be to tell the truth about it. God has relented, like in Nineveh. He says he was going to destroy the city, and the U.S. is pretty corrupt. And if they tell the truth about it, maybe that would be enough to avert God's wrath. But we'll see.
But remember, Babylon could have been healed, but she was not healed because she didn't repent. And so, on that note, I want to thank you for joining me on this platform, Bart. You're always welcome to come back. I got to have you back on here again, man. Be blessed, be safe, you and your family, and take care, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Rashid.
Hey, be blessed. Everybody, thank you all for joining me on the Red Pill Diaries. I want to say this to you all. I always say that time is the most precious thing that we have because it's an unrenewable resource. Remember, once you've used it up, you'll never get it again, right? And remember that, right? So make sure that you spend your time in the proper way. So I say this and leaving today. Do right by others, not because there's some material gain to be had or some accolades to be had, but do right by others because it's the right, the humane, and the godly thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching you, remember, God Almighty is watching you. As my late, great, and beautiful mother would always say, God sits high on a throne of power, but he looks low at the actions of man. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that the divine supreme being of freedom, justice, and equality has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true. But above all things, remember to stay righteous and hit the like and subscribe button. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Thank you, everybody. Deuces. We're out of here. Peace.
was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a